like the monkey story last year, this story is reminding us how our traditions can turn into a problem if we continue to overexploit our planet. So in Uganda you have this tradition of harvesting grasshoppers as a delicacy, and they are indeed delicious. I've tried it many times and I've enjoyed it many times. They harvest these grasshoppers, they cook and boil them, and for them it's a traditional treat that they eat like we eat chips or nuts with a beer. So they use these oil drums, these large containers that they usually use to ship oil, and they have metal sheets coming out of those, and they use artificial lights during the night, very bright lighting compared to the way you would light up a soccer stadium. It's insane how bright these lights are. And they use the lights to attract the grasshoppers, and then they come down from the sky and they want to sit on these reflecting metal sheets, and then they slide down and they fall into these barrels, and the barrels, they have oil inside, so they cannot crawl out of them, and that's how they sometimes harvest over 100 barrels per night per setup. It's a big business, and people even change their profession during Nsenene season, during the grasshopper season, where you could be a baker, you could be working at a clothing store, you could work at the bank. But no, during Nsenene season, you change your profession and you invest in being a harvester, or you're being part of a harvest party. Because people can easily make a year's salary during those 2 months that you can harvest those grasshoppers. To harvest these grasshoppers and to photograph these grasshoppers, it can be quite dangerous, because they use these halogen lights, also used for security reasons, where they take off the glass protection bulb, and you only have the glowing spiral of the lamp, which of course is very bright, and then they amplify the power input on the lamp by 3 or 4 times. So you have a super bright light that radiates UVC. And UVC radiation is the worst UV radiation that you can have. It's more harmful than the UVB that we protect ourselves against when we put sunscreen on. This UVC is the reason that many people end up with skin cancer when harvesting these grasshoppers, and it's also very damaging to your eyes. You cannot look straight into them, because then you just go blind. And for me, photographing this was a real challenge, because especially with the wide scenes, you want to be able to see the whole setup, and you want to see the landscape with those lights in it. And fortunately we have mirrorless cameras these days, which allowed me to just look at the LCD screen instead of looking through the viewfinder straight into these bright lights. So that saved my day. But for the people who harvest these grasshoppers, it is certainly a risk. And there are people having eye problems, there are people having skin problems. But for the money, they're willing to do anything. We traveled not only to one location, but we traveled to many locations in Uganda, and everywhere we came we heard that the annual numbers were going down, and that their harvest was not as good as it used to be in the past. That means that they harvest more and more of these grasshoppers out of the ecosystem without knowing actual numbers. They don't know population size, they don't know the conditions they need. There's not a lot of science that has been done on the species. They don't actually know where they come from. So that makes it really complicated. If you have a growth in the demand and you harvest more without knowing anything about population size, You don't have to be a scientist to realize that in the end something will possibly go wrong, and that's what they're seeing now. The local people are seeing less and less grasshoppers during the night, and it's like a warning signal. So currently Makerere University in Kampala is looking into possibilities of rearing grasshoppers in captivity, which could eventually have a big impact on the whole ecosystem, because they would still be able to increase numbers by rearing them in captivity in large numbers to provide them to the local markets, and by doing so you would not have the same pressure on the ecosystem as you would have when you harvest from the ecosystem itself. So that would certainly provide opportunities, but it's a matter of acceptance if that will succeed. It is a matter of acceptance with the local population if this rearing in captivity will succeed, because it's the same as we have here in Europe, where we're trying to create this artificial meat. They might be able to do so, but as a consumer, are we going to accept it? Are we willing to eat the product? Are we willing to believe that the product is as good and as tasty and as healthy as it is when you have it from the natural ecosystem? It's also a matter if the market is willing to accept the product. And that's the biggest challenge now, is to convince the harvesters that it's more profitable to look into possibilities to raise these animals in captivity than harvesting them from the ecosystem itself, because they just say, oh, this can be done. We make a lot of money through the harvest business, so stay out of your way, university. We don't need you. We can fix things ourselves. And that's the fight now that is the most challenging for the people in the university, for the researchers, as for the ecosystem. And for people living in Western Europe or the United States, when they see a story like this, I think, or at least I hope, that they are willing to reconsider their beef consumption and that they feel invited to start eating insects, because I really believe that is a more sustainable path. And if people in Uganda are to create a sustainable model for eating insects in that way, then why shouldn't we? I have to admit that at first, when I ate my first grasshopper, I had goosebumps all over just because of the idea of eating an insect. But I have to admit they're really delicious, and I miss them. I would like to have them as a snack this afternoon. And it is a more sustainable model, and I think that's the way we need to head towards.